As I said, what is very interesting here that we basically introduce a new role in the community, which is the let's say organization role. And the main idea here that you can be in a community and you can develop inside your community with your learners some scaffolding strategies. So I will show you a bit how it works. So in OpenBadge Passport, when you have a space, you have your own branded start page, which is very important. That the question of identity is very important for many organizations. So they need to have their own URL for accessing the passport. When you are as a learner inside the passport, if you are in a space, you get your dedicated, your own dedicated dashboard. And here you can see the information only about your space. So you don't see the 150,000 users that there is in the system. First of all, you get information about your community, about your space. And this is making the interaction between users stronger, because there is no, I would say, noise around it. But still you can jump at the higher level and see all what happened in the passport. Putting badge in action, I was speaking about this concept about the learner himself, the badge earner. But basically here, what is interesting is that you can say, you can have the same approach for an organization. So here, you can see from here that you can have in your space different membership level. So it can be an open space, everyone can join, a control space, then there is the administrator, the space will accept or reject the member, or a private space. And sorry, what is interesting here is that you can connect your OBF account and define what badges you want to use inside the space. These badges will be used in the space. And you have in the space also roles. So administrator, creator can create mini-maps, so pathways, and the issuer can issue badges. And here it's very interesting as use cases that you can have a badge team designing badges in OpenBadge Factory side, and you can have a space for a school, and the teachers of the schools will be able to issue the badges to their own students inside the space in their content. So they don't need to have access to OpenBadge Factory. So it's what I call a distributed way to put badges in action. So the badge will be, you will give a license to badge to the issuer of the passport. Sorry, just next one. And then we have developed a tool that we call mini-maps. Mini-maps are basically like metro maps. So it's a tool where you can set up stations, and under the station you can add badges, one or several badges for a station. You can also define the time that you need for completing a station, and then when you have been creating this kind of minimap, you can assign or suggest this minimap to some of your users inside your space, or you can publish it to all your members in the space, or publish it in all OpenBadge Passport. What is very interesting in these pathways that you can build what we call hybrid pathway, because you can use your own badges that you have in your OBF account, but you can use also any badge or badge application that are already in the community. So, for example, in France, in some professional development project, you have badges from several organizations gathered in a common minimap, which is a common pathway. And then you have the tracking feature that here you can see when you suggest a minimap to your learners, you can see then where they are in the minimap, what is the completion level of this minimap. So what is very interesting that we had already in OpenMesh Passport a functionality what we call objectives, but now the spaces are given a stronger, I would say, sense or value of objective, because your personal objectives can be basically connected to objective success by the space administrators. So when you as a badge or as a minimap creator, when you assign a badge or suggest a badge, it will come to the badge earner or to users' objectives. It will be suggest, and then you can accept as a learner. You can always accept or reject it. You can also set up your own objectives, so you could pick badges which have been created in different spaces. And as you see here, you can also track and manage your own objectives. So it's very important to show that, because even you have spaces in the community, in the passport, spaces are managed by organizations. The learner, the badge earner can always decide if he wants or not to accept this suggestion or these assignments. So next step about the development of the space is that we are pushing on assessments, meaning that in the future we will be able to bring let's say the typology of the university, of the organization, and to bring it inside the space, meaning that if there is a badge application which is proposed to Eric and the boss of Eric is Don, for example, Don will automatically receive my badge application, and we will be able to assess it. So the other important thing is badging. So it will be possible to have this distributed badging strategy inside the spaces, and now we are developing some kind of tracking system to be able to showcase, to visualize, to make visible if there is a gap between the objectives of this space and what has been basically completed. And we are pushing also on communication. And the idea that in this generic OpenMesh Passport, where you have, as I say, great number of users and great number of badges, you can also, using these spaces, connect with an API to different kind of systems. So it will be a future development, but for example, job opportunities, training, coaching could be for different countries connected to the spaces. And we are also planning some development with machine learning tools. And here the idea would be that the learner who has an account in OpenMesh Passport could basically get with some algorithm, some view of what he could or she could do in the passport. So suggestions could come not only from spaces, from let's say people, but also from the fact that if I have a badge which is, for example, already used in some pathways, the system could say, okay, these pathways could be interesting for you. It's a first stage, but of course, as you see here, there would be the possibility also to have algorithm based on the relation between the badges, but also on the relation between people. So there is an endorsement, as I say, the passport. So you could have suggestions about badges which has been earned by people who have been endorsing you or are working closely with you. So that's why my presentation about this new, I would say, layer or new dimension of OpenBadge Passport. If you are interested to visit and to try the minimaps, you can use this QR code, and you will have access to a sandbox space to play with it. But what is very interesting, in my opinion, here, that as I said, it's very important that badges are not only issued and received and lost, in the big universe of internet. That you have definitely a space or a place where you can grow the value of the badges, be recognized by the community, that there is some activity. But what is interesting, that now I think that we have success to connect 3 levels: the personal learning environment, learner-centric approach, the community level approach, and now the scaffolding, and I would say the space which is managed by an organization that can, or which can implement its own badging strategy or its own learning strategy. Do you have any questions?
Great, thanks a lot, Serge. I noticed one question from Stella asking about spaces for dedicated passports. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So I was speaking about OpenBadge Passport because OpenBadge Passport is a generic open service that we provide to everyone, but we have also several installations of OpenBadge Passport that we call dedicated passport. And we have the IDB passport, for example, we have HPass passport, and so on. And in these passports, there is also this space functionality. So the idea is to have the same, let's say, structure, not only in OpenBadge Passport, but in dedicated passport. So a dedicated passport, it's the difference compared with OpenBadge Passport, that the managing organization can basically manage the whole community. So there is a community, let's say the IDB community, and inside IDB community, you can have different kind of partners having their own, let's say, spaces and own areas inside this community, dedicated community passport.
Can I follow up my question?
Yes, of course.
So what happens is, this is the concept is very interesting, but I feel with the people that I talk to, when I mention this, the idea of space, like everyone is like, oh yes, I want my space. So I want you to tell me, what are the questions, maybe questions that I need to ask in order to make sure that I'm not creating a gazillion spaces for everyone that is asking for one, because they think they're, you know that I have all these clients, right? So the people that do this thing, they're not interested in this other thing. And therefore, immediately they will say, oh, we need our own space. And I want to be sure that the space is used I want to have control. Remember, I said I had no guardrails. I'm using my guardrails. I want to know. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. First of all, I would say that don't be afraid of giving them a space, because while it's not harming, they have their own space. They could have their own space. Try to deploy some strategy. It could take a long time, but it will not harm your passport, because it will be inside their spaces, and still they will have the possibility to use all what there is in
but it could create an image. See, here's my thing. A lot of these people are the same people that yesterday were talking about communities of practice. That's where they're coming from, right? And I always worry about that, because frequently people talk about community of practice. They want create this community, and they think it's a turnkey, that they create the community continues on its own. And I know that's not how it works. So to me, I understand what you're saying, but to me, there is a risk of creating these spaces where nothing happens. And that is a bad image for the passport.
I would say yes and no. So I would say yes if we would be in a context where all should be done by organization. You know what I mean? But it's still the passport is still a personal learning environment, basically. So mainly and first of all, the passport is a place where your learners, where your partners as badge earners will get, to receive their badges, share their badges, having interaction with the community. Okay, so if someone wants in a space to deploy, I would say, its own strategy in its own context, the idea is to have a well-defined context. I think that you could give them a try, but you could ask them, well, what is your strategy? What do you want to do in the space that you could not do inside
without it?
Inside the passport. But I think I've noticed in that some organizations have a big issue to understand that badging is not only delivering credentials. It's not that. So it's we try with the space basically to connect badges with the processes which are basically in action in education sector, in HR activities, that organization could have a way to understand what is happening with the badge. So there is a win-win situation. The badge earners can basically get suggestions about development. They can be scaffolding things. They can be supported, and at the same time, the organization can see what is happening basically with our badges. So, but of course, it takes time because many organizations have still, as I said, a very traditional way of credentialing, and so I issue badges as flyers, and everybody should be happy, but it's not the case. So, for example, what is very interesting in the space that you can, for example, suggest badges or badge application to people having some badges, and this is totally generic, so dynamic. Sorry. So you could also give to some people having some badges the right to be badge issuers. So badges are not only, I would say, the credential that you receive. Badges are licensed to badge also. And here the idea why the passport is interesting is because it's supporting open recognition by the fact that you can use it for developing recognizing community. And I think that the recognizing community is not only a community where people just get badges and are happy to say, okay, I've got this badge. It's a community where you can create your own badge and be recognized by some peer, but it's also a community that can create their own badges. So I know it's a bit challenging at the moment because there is a question of acculturation. So, but I think that there is a lot of potential to activate the community, and I think that until now it was not working because we had one missing link, and I was not seeing it, but I understood that what was the missing link. Basically, the missing link was that organizations were they had only tool for issuing badges and tracking and managing. And in the passport, the community, you had only your personal learning environment and the community. A community of what? A community which basically was a bench of 150,000 individuals. It doesn't make a community. It's not yet a community. Now the idea that you have, like in the real life, that you have practitioners, you have organizations providing services, developing strategies. So you have the third level, which is the organization level here.
Sorry, Eric. I think I'm going to have to stop this very interesting discussion and move on to the next one. But thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
We will move on to the next one, and it will be Carrie and Justin talking about OBI 3.0, correct?
That's right, OBI 3.0 it is. Eric, that was great. Thank you. The mini maps, that's really awesome. And I hope I talk soon. Justin, are you here?
I am.
I see you. There you are. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and then we can get going. Let's see here. All right, can you see my screen?
I see it.
Yes.
Yep. Okay, good. Okay, everyone. So we are here really to talk about the future of open badges. So not exactly what's happening now, but what we're hoping to do in the near future. In fact, pilots even planning in the very near future. And I'm here today with Justin Pitcher from Anthology.com. Justin has taken on the courageous role of co-chairing this work. So we're lucky to have him here today with us to talk about it. Just briefly about me. So my name is Carrie, and I've been around in open badges for a long time, since the beginning, really mostly as a developer, a technologist, an issuing platform, CTO. Pretty much I've just been sort of working on this for a very long time, thinking about it from education and activist perspective. I'm currently working for the Badger platform as their director of research and innovation. And I'm going to pass this along to Justin and tell you a little bit about himself.
Hi, everybody. So I am a development manager at Anthology, formerly Campus Labs. I manage both a open badge platform called Milestone, as well as some assessment and ePortfolio type tooling, which, while it's not directly related to badging, has a lot of kind of overlap within that. I came into the OB community just as sort of the transition from 1.1 to 2 was happening. So I was a late implementer of 1.1, which we quickly sort of not abandoned, but switched over to 2. And then have been heavily involved with IMS ever since.
Thanks, Justin. So I think first what I just want to go over briefly, many of you may already know this, but is about the history of open badges. And we started out with a very simple set of metadata. The 0.5 was like, here's a bunch of metadata that can describe some recognition. And then in 1.0, we started separating that out. So it would be really convenient to have a badge class here that could be reused by assertions. So we separated that out. And then in this is 1.1 there, but it should be 1.5 on the side. We introduced linked data, which made badges searchable on the web and also introduced extensions. And then in 2.0, the end of, I think it was like 2016, we added additional recipient properties. So we added URL, telephone. We added the ability to add criteria content instead of just a URL for criteria. We added standards alignment. And so you can add in skill, or like the rich skill descriptors that we talked about today. You can add those now in badges. An array of evidence versus just like one URL for evidence, and also endorsement. And then IMS Global took badges from there. They shepherded it from there, and that working group introduced Badge Connect API, which is a standardized approach to using an API to pull badges from different backpacks. And now what we're looking at is sort of this next level of open badges, right? And this is going to be aligned with the W3C Verifiable Credential standard. And this is we're also looking at a shared data model with the comprehensive learning record, which is typically, I think in the past it was called the digital transcript, and now it's called the CLR, which is more of an array of achievements, whereas open badge would be a single achievement. And then we're also going to talk about what it would mean to have like a single set of immutable data that is different from badges, how they've been now, right? Where you could actually change a badge even after it's been issued, but now with verifiable credentials, it would be immutable. Justin, you want to talk about this a little bit? Take this slide here.
Yeah, so there's a couple of core standards that have advanced quite a bit in the last little while that are really accelerating the work that we're doing here. So there is the decentralized identifiers, and it's out of scope really for this topic to talk about the importance of decentralization and what that can empower with learners. But along with that is the verifiable credentials specification, which is really a mechanism to express claims about a subject, and you can store that on the web in a way that is cryptographically secure, and it respects the subject's privacy, and it's machine readable, which is awesome. And then there is also an emergence in skills-based recognition and hiring. It's still early days, but the conversation is happening. I more and more have conversations, even on the portfolio side, about like work integrated learning and career building. And then from that, you have the community needs, which are kind of extending that, even from industry trying to push data back. And then on the issue of shifting human trust, I'll let Carrie talk a little bit about that.
Oh yeah, sure, thanks. I added this a little bit later because I've been thinking about it a lot. Cheryl Grant's here today, and she's been involved with badges for a long time too, and she's been thinking a lot about how we've been, like over time, we've been shifting human trust to trust technology. So examples she uses like Airbnb and ride sharing services like Uber and Lyft. And I've been thinking about this a lot too, and thinking about how we've been trading human trust for convenience, right? We've been saying, okay, well, there's stuff we used to do as humans, and now we're saying, well, all right, we're going to trade in convenience. We say, okay, it's a lot easier to do it online. And I'm thinking about this line of thinking in terms of open badges 3.0 and how it sort of provides opportunity to explore how tech can relay trust without human bias intermediation. Not to say that data properties can't be biased and that AI, we know, can be biased, but that there's this opportunity to explore this, right? With open badges, we originally wanted to imply that the tech could provide elements of trust. We wanted recognition to be less asymmetrical and less about who the issuer is and more about how the open badge infrastructure could establish that trust. And this is why there's always a verification object as part of that assertion, and why badges were intended to be both human and machine readable. But since then, the tech has evolved. And so now we can associate trust with digital identities and decentralized governance based on things like cryptography and possibly blockchains. So this doesn't mean like we aren't still fighting for this shift in power structures, because we are, right? But there are plenty who are working in this tech who really want to see it as a way to democratize data and give people more control over that data that's about them. So this is part of the transformations that have been leading to what Open Badges 3.0 can be. Sort of like we're leveling up a little bit here, I think. Let's see here, Justin. Okay, so I'm just going to take this slide too. So these are some of the problems that 3.0 can solve. But before we get into the verifiability and the W3C alignment, there's also some other changes that's coming to the metadata that may interest you too. And it's worth noting that although 3.0 is being developed and we're looking at that, 2.0 badges can coexist, and they probably will for a long time, much like how earlier versions of badges have always coexisted with 2.0. So it's good to think that 3.0 isn't just here to replace 2.0 right away. Like all this work that is happening now on the 2.0 platforms, badging platforms, is great, and it's going to keep going. So some of the things I want to just tell you that we're going to explain in the next few minutes before we even get to the verifiability is that with the metadata, we can actually state that a badge is more than just a badge, more than just a micro-credential, that we can distinguish between issuer and creator, which is something that the community has been looking for a really long time. We can add a description result to the skill alignments along with the evidence. And we can do something, that Nate Auto introduced, I think is fascinating. Others have too, which is asserting single skills. And this would be, we'll describe that, but this would be sort of a very discrete aspect of an open badge that would describe just a single skill set. Oh, sorry, Justin, it's still me. All right, so more than just a micro-credential. So we're going to add a property called achievement type. An achievement type already exists in the comprehensive learning record. And so we can say, okay, a badge can also be an achievement, an assessment, an assignment, an award, a certificate, certification, any of these that are on my slide here. And also you can add other regular expressions, right, to describe other types of achievements. This is what's in the CLR description now. I don't know that this is the final list. I'm not sure about that yet. But I think this is something we've been wanting to do for a long time, and badges is a way to say like, hey, this is something else. And it is specifically this thing. So you should look at it in this way. I think there's a lot of discussions to be had about that, but it's interesting to think about how we can do that. Justin?
Yeah, so in the world of 2.0, like issuer and creator for a badge class, like this concept is tightly coupled. So there are platforms today that have tried to offer some variations or some additional features related to this. Like we've tried to do issuing grants. I believe there is the original creator open badge extension, which some platforms have made use of. I believe OBF, the Open Badge Factory, is one such platform. And these do a part, like they're helpful, but in the end, the data is kind of obfuscated. It certainly isn't necessarily a perfect representation of the reality. And if other platforms don't care about these extensions or you can't represent it, then it becomes lost to that specific platform. When you can distinguish between these in a native way within the spec, it becomes more realistic to support those workflows globally and to get into things like, let's have an industry regulator who wants to create a library of badges, which they can then authorize to trainers and educators to issue on their behalf. Standards bodies, or even there's the situation where you might have within an institution like a university, specific schools who could have their own issuer identity. So it's not coming just from the university, but it's coming from, say, the School of Business. But then they have, university level badges that the school is then authorized to issue on behalf of the university system. And so that little subtlety in the ecosystem goes a long way for quality of life and that kind of thing with our implementers. Now, if you go to the next slide, Carrie, because we have a little bit of a model diagram here. One challenge that will come into play with this in this area is really sorting out, how do I know as a consumer of this badge that the issuer was authorized by the creator of the badge class to award this? And so that's something that the group is going to have to examine and work out together.
Yeah, totally. The next feature we wanted to tell you about is this concept of result descriptions. This also comes from the CLR. And you know how we have the skill alignment in the badge class now. What you can have alongside evidence that you know, just could demonstrate what how those were achieved. The result descriptions can actually describe the mastery, the levels of mastery assigned with rubrics that may be associated with those skills. So that's something to keep an eye on as we go forward to that. And we have a graph here too this is from the proposal, which I have a link to that I can give you all later. And if you see here, we can talk about this a little bit more later because this is sort of a different structure of the verifiable credential. You have this concept of a recipient who has this credential, right? And there's this alignment here of the target alignments that we have now, which may be rich skill descriptors coming from any of the frameworks that are out there. But then here you have these results, and these results can say, hey, this is how much they mastered, you know, of these skills. So, you know, this could be a way of really getting to some like finite descriptions for earners as to, you know, what they have accomplished with their badge. And then lastly, before we get into the verifiable credentials aspect of all of this, is this concept of asserting single skills. So how this would work, and I don't think I have the chart here for this, but instead of having a badge class or a badge image, instead the credential would have a reference to the skill, and then it could point to the RSD. So it would be a simple assertion of one skill. That would work very differently than a badge. We wouldn't even use it in the same way, I don't think. I'm not even exactly sure how we would all use it, but I know every time I mentioned it to others, they thought like, oh, this is very interesting. Because imagine how you could start plugging in single skills all over the place, or how I could assert my skills instead of a whole badge that describes it. So it could be more efficient, could be easier to use, and it could be more specific. So I'm kind of excited to explore this more too. Oh, and Justin, I think you had an example here that you wanted to talk about having to do with like campuses tying skills to coursework assignments.
Yeah, so we manage through like some other stuff, a lot of authentic assessment, work integrated learning at the course level. And the idea of tying badges has always been a desired outcome with here, and it is being done. But for most of these assertions, they really want to award single skill competencies. And the lift, like the prep work and the volume of effort just to make all these badge classes for all of these different skills that they want to award at a very granular level is unrealistic for most campuses. It's just too much time. And so this kind of model could go so far as to be dynamic, where it doesn't require, like it wouldn't have a badge class behind it. And so platforms could take advantage of the ability to generate these in real time based on simple, alignment properties for whatever is happening. And I think that's a very powerful, way to get that skills currency that we talk about a lot, but we don't have necessarily the granularity for it.
Yeah, exactly. And Nate's going to talk more about the Open Skills Network next. And you can imagine how we would have so many skills out in the world to choose from, right? Versus having to create this over and over again, much like what Don was showing earlier as well. So if someone could go in and just choose, right, it would save a lot of time and effort. And also we would get different, more accurate data sets there too. Okay, and then I'm going to introduce sort of about the verifiability of this, and then Justin's going to explain how it works. And we'll tag team a little bit here. So what is going to do is we have this like open badges achievement model, right? So it still would have, we have open badges and the concept of a badge class, although we may consider them more to be an achievement, right? How do you describe the achievement? And then we have the verifiable credential verifiability model. And verifiable credentials come from the W3C, and they've been around for a couple of years now. And originally, actually, the work started with open badges. The first use cases came from open badges to describe how do you make them more verifiable. And it ends up that how this works is more of a shift to decentralization. Instead of hosting badge data, what we're talking about instead is it being encapsulated into something that's cryptographically provable, right? And what this can do is a lot for learners. It lead to them being able to create the identities that are associated with these credentials. So instead of it being an email address that someone else gives them, they have this identity that they create that they can associate with these skills, right, and these badges. Also means that they would have access to their data for as long as they have it, because it can be stored on their like phones or on their desktops or in cloud services that they've chosen. So they will always have access to this information throughout their lives. And also they will have the ability to control how their credentials are combined, much like they can do in the backpack, except consider that verifiable credential standard is going to be used for government IDs and student IDs. And I mean, you name it, it's a good list out there that I can send you later. So you'll be able to combine badges with other types of verifiable data and use this to apply for jobs or, loans or, other opportunities that are out there. So this is like a very different way to think about badges. It's more of an exchange, and it's a set of data that you really are going to be able to hold. So I just want to explain a little bit more about how it works, and we can take it from there. We'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. I'm sure there'll be a lot, so happy to go through them too at that time.
Sure. So just some kind of Cole's Notes early steps, and then we'll get into a diagram here for VCs. Out of band, like initially, there is this element of, okay, so if an issuer is expressing claims about a subject, the issuer and that recipient, they need to agree on what the identifier is for the subject. So that's a platform element that's not necessarily part of the VC spec, but you'll imagine that the various open badges platforms will have to have an element where, instead of this asymmetrical email exchange that Carrie alluded to, there's more of an explicit identifier exchange. From that point on, the issuer can issue a verifiable credential to that identifier, that subject, who can then be stored inside some sort of system, a wallet, a host. And note that this holder isn't necessarily the subject, and we can talk about that a little bit later, but this does have opportunity for, say, parents to own or hold on to credentials that relate to their children or some other governing party. The proof is requested by a verifier. So separate from the VC is the verifiable presentation. And then in response, the recipient shares that the verifiable presentation with the verifier. So if we go to the next slide with the diagram, you'll see this referred to as like the verifiable credential triangle sometimes. But there's always kind of these three parties: the issuer, the holder, and the verifier. So issuer digitally signs these claims about a subject. There's stuff that they write to a verifiable data registry. Well, not necessarily, but in most models, we refer to patterns that involve a data registry. The VC is then held by the holder. They manage those, they put them together in wallets, and then they create verifiable presentations, which are effectively proofs that they control the subject of the verifiable credential. You can give the VC itself to somebody and they can look at it, but that doesn't prove that you control the subject of that VC. All you can do is prove that the issuer did in fact issue this VC and it hasn't been tampered with. And then these verifiers can look at the verifiable presentation. They can verify both that the issuer did issue this content and that the subject is in control of the holder who gave them that presentation. So I think we can go to the next one, which is really talking about, okay, what does this mean as a badge? The Open Badge 3.0 is just VCs. It's a flavor of a verifiable credential. But it's important to know that we're not going to lose any of that stuff that we're kind of used to with 2.0 badges. So the data that's in there can be read and rendered in these rich, visual presentations on the web. They can be moved around in that same way. We don't have to think of these as just strictly data at a very abstract level that isn't fun to work with anymore. As Carrie alluded to, this is more of a deliberate identity exchange than an asymmetrical exchange of email addresses. Some of us are not big fans of the whole idea of, not that OB 2.0 was restricted just to email, but let's be honest, almost every badge is awarded to email. And that idea of just being able to passively award stuff to people, while useful in some situations, creates some weird behaviors and ethical implications. And then badges themselves will share similar verification processes as everything else. So like Carrie said, being able to put your open badge in a tool, in a platform that knows how to work with other VCs is really powerful. That lowers the barrier for users. It simplifies things. It makes things consistent. The open badge ecosystem doesn't become this other entity, the one more thing that they have to deal with. It kind of naturally and organically can flow in with other things that they will be storing. Some of us already right now working with vaccine passports. And some of those, I believe, are based in verifiable credentials. So it's happening right now, and kind of jumping on that train makes a lot of sense for us. So what this looks like as a life cycle, if we go to the diagram.
Yeah, 1 second, Justin, just before we get to the diagram, one other quick point on email addresses is what we also know is that badges that get issued email addresses, and then we no longer have access to those emails, and we no longer have access to those badges. And that these orphan badges has been a problem for a long time. And so being able to control the identifier that the badge is associated with means that you also control access to that, because you won't lose it. You don't lose that email address.
Yes, that's a very good point. In fact, we've even, it hasn't been a real problem yet, but within university systems, you can imagine that they recycle email addresses. Some have policies not to do it, but some do. And so, restoration and recovery life cycles that are based on email access could compromise the ownership and issuing of badges. So when we look at a VC lifecycle for an open badge, it doesn't look that different from the 2.0 lifecycle. You still have these issuers who are creating badge classes. The issuer itself is going to have some sort of identifier. For the purposes of this diagram, it's indicating that identities are recorded to a verifiable data registry. Not all decentralized methods require this. So we don't have to assume that this is happening here, but just for simplicity's sake, that's what's being indicated here. Those badge classes, they get issued just like they did before, but now instead of the OB2 assertion JSON, you have the verifiable credential JSON. This is issued to a specific subject, as we mentioned, and those VCs are held by holders inside hosts and wallets. And then they can take those and they can generate verifiable presentations that add on proofs that they control the subject identity. And verifiers can look at those and they can validate that the issuer did in fact issue this, that it hasn't mutated in any way. So there's tamper evident that the subject is who they think it is. And then of course, you can see any long-term, actually I already mentioned long-term mutation. So if we go to the next slide, just a little note about how DIDs work here too, because this diagram sort of implied that everything was recorded on the same data registry, but DIDs are sort of agnostic about all of that. So DIDs ultimately are trying to produce a DID document that has some information to use. But there are many DID methods. So the DID schema, the syntax at the top right there. So we indicate it's a DID scheme, and then there is some sort of DID method identifier, and this basically just tells the system how you're supposed to work with this DID to get the document. And then after that is the method-specific identifier, which is kind of like the unique ID within that DID ecosystem. Different methods will use different data registries or no registry at all. So while this diagram does indicate that we are going to a registry to retrieve a DID document, there are DID methods like DID key and DID web which either work with these sort of generative documents or through things like well-known JSON files that are hosted by a URL, like on the domain of, say, an issuer. And that's sort of how they're proving their identity, is through control of things like domains and DNS. The cool thing, though, is there is this universal resolver. So this is like an open source tool that people are allowed to use. It basically gets trained on how to do all of these different DID methods. So instead of every platform having to like, well, first of all, instead of us having to decide that these are the 2 DID methods that we're only ever going to use, we don't have to worry so much about that. And then implementers can simply use the universal resolver to read DIDs instead of having to, like, on their own native platform, like code up, okay, here's the logic for extracting this DID versus this one, and spending months or years trying to figure that out. So the community has been great in sort of bridging that gap for everybody. And so I don't want anybody to be too concerned about decentralized identifiers becoming a big lift for everyone to work with. And I think now we're going to get into some actual code examples.
Yeah, I'm going to show a comparison of the 2.0 data to the 3.0. And thank you for walking through that, Justin, because it's challenging to explain all this because there is new technology in here. And I know that every time I do it, I change it a little bit. And I think you did a good job, Justin. One thing I just want to add is that you can think about a DID as a not so different from a URL, really, right? This is intended to work in web spaces. At some point, you're going to find that you're going to be able to log into applications online with DIDs or verifiable credentials using DIDs. And this is going to be great. You're not going to need passwords anymore. I mean, this is going to be a really great tool and a great way to control your data. So at some point, maybe we should just do some kind of presentation and talk through what DIDs are. I think folks would really appreciate that. And it took me a little bit while to understand them. So I just wanted to bring up a couple of code examples. I know not everybody here is spending a lot of time in the metadata, but just so we could sort of emphasize what the changes are and compare them a little bit. So at the top here, you have the recipient data. Let me make this so I can see it in my notes a little bit bigger here. So you have what we are used to. We're accustomed seeing in 2.0 email, right? And the verification is hosted. Typically, that's what we're seeing. We see not so many signed badges are typically hosted on platforms. And then we have this issuer profile that's part of the badge class. And so this means that it's implied that this issuer created this badge and is asserting the achievement too. And so this is what it's going to look more like with an Open Badges 3.0. Okay, so up at the top, you see we're referencing the context up here, which is already in the JSON LD. So this won't change too much, except we're referencing the context and the fields that are needed for verifiable credentials. Then what you have here in the credential subject, this is where it gets a little bit different. So we have the issuer here on its own, right at the top of the assertion. And then we have issuance date, there's like an expiration date. So it's sort of similar to Open Badges now. There's like an alignment there. But then we have this credential subject. And the credential subject is where the DID comes in. And then we have this achievement. And the achievement type is a badge class. And here's where that new achievement type feature comes in. So this example is a certificate. And the creator of this one actually happens to be the same as the issuer, but they can be different. That ability will be there. And here's where you would see the skill alignments. And so this is sort of like your badge class. And this is part of your assertion. And then down here, we have the result description. And this is what aligns to the alignment. So this was an ELA literacy alignment, and then the performance level, the learner exceeded that level. By the way, this data may not make any sense, like in real life. It's just put together as an example. And then the evidence would be this web page that describes this robot drone analysis. But then down here, let me go back one more, is where the proof is described. And what it says is like, there's this type, it's signed using this method on this day. This is what the purpose of this signature is. Right? And then it is how it's going to be verified and the signature itself. And so what this does is helps to establish verification of the identity of the recipient, of the issuer, and also that it hasn't been changed since it was issued. And this is why it's different than hosted badges, because hosted badges right now, you could change the data and no one would know, right? That's been a long-standing issue with badges. With this version of badges, you can't alter the data once it's been issued. All right, Justin, do you want to go through some of the comparison here? Maybe like these charts compare the two.
Yeah, so because there is a little bit more of a data-oriented architecture here, the badge image is technically optional. That's just sort of a happenstance element of doing VC. I imagine that most will, but you know, some platform implementers do feel that we will move towards a more of a clustering of data about people and less about the visual presentation. So it doesn't really matter what you prefer as a platform. You can do it either way. We've already talked about the badge creator stuff, so that's awesome. The achievement type stuff, I think, is type and the result description are kind of subtle but really huge improvements. Again, like anyone who's worked in OB has like encountered those people who are going, well, is it a micro credential? Is it a certificate? Is it a sticker? You know, do I care about this? Is it high stakes, low stakes, formal, informal, you know, for credit? Like, Stella asked in the questions, like, is there opportunity to create other types? And yeah, probably. I believe the list currently was inherited from the CLR 1.0 spec, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's no reason to assume that it's you know, it's set in stone and can't change, or have a method for you know, pushing a new one into use. And the result description, like for me, coming from the ePortfolio world and rubric assessment, the ability to actually capture the specific assessment results in there. I believe there is an extension right now for like assessment where you can describe the rubric that was used for awarding a badge, but this would allow you to capture the actual assessment score that someone had and actually tie in performance levels with that competency assertion, which is just rad. And then of course the super granular lightweight skill assertion, which we talked about, which, you know, I think is awesome.
Thanks. Then in this next slide, this comparison of security. So with 2.0, we had this profile object, and now the identity can be verified using a decentralized identifier. With recipient identity, we're using email. It's potentially use URL or telephone. That will go away and replaced by decentralized identifier as well. It doesn't mean that email can't be used to like communicate about the badge, stay in touch with the earner, but it means that the identity in the actual badge would be represented by the decentralized identifier that they choose. Typically, issuer control verification was done by hosting data. It's done using the domain. I say 3.0 why I have this here. But I guess this is what we're talking about is verification about issuer control is stronger than just doing it by domain. It's doing it by this decentralized identifier, and same with earner control. Right? It was very hard for a verifier to know who that email address really belongs to in a badge. And now they will be able to, verifiers will be able to check that with centralized identifiers. And with storage, we've had badge backpacks, and backpacks understand badges, and that works. But now we're talking about any kind of verifiable credential wallet or other types of hosts that can store verifiable credentials and open badges. And part of it, we're going to have some challenges here because there are a lot of verifiable credential wallets who don't understand how to display open badges. And figuring out that alignment is part of the work that's happening now. There are baked badges, of course, and open badges. That'd be optional in 3.0. We don't really need the need for baked badges, although there's been a lot of talk about how to bake data into other types of images. And I think that'll be interesting to explore, especially not just at the open badges level, but actually at the verifiable credentials level. They've been talking about that more. Next is tamper evident, right? Open badges right now, it's pretty weak. Like I said before, you can't tell if data has changed. And then with open badges 3.0, well, unless you're using a signature, right? But unless with 3.0 you can. very much tell if even a space has been added to a badge, you can tell that it's been tampered with. And then lastly is proof, where in open badges, we've had this verification object, and that's going to go away. Right? We're going to use the verifiable credential data model, and we're going to lean on the expertise of the Verifiable Credentials Working Group at W3C to provide us with guidance on what signatures should we use and what methods should we use, what protocols should we use. All of that is going to come from experts who are not just in education. In fact, many of them are doing like verification of shipping containers, right, and supply chains, like this is in like government documents, like very, very where there's security that is even much higher level than badges has been all along. But great, so now we could use badges in that way if we really choose to, which is awesome. And then we have some challenges, right? These standards are new. They're challenging to explain. The technology is newer to folks. We're not just talking about the web anymore. We're talking about the next version of the web, this decentralized version of the web. And so it's very new. And it's funny because open badges has kind of felt new for the last 10 years, right? But now we're like taking to this next step. So there's some challenges there in explaining it and understanding it and making sure we're implementing it in a way that works for so many parties. Just as we've seen with open badges all along, verifiers and relying third parties just aren't really involved yet. And it's really hard to have those conversations about what is needed in the metadata if you don't really know what needs to be expected. But I think there's more like recognition of that now because we've had so much practice thinking about that we're really trying to focus on this ecosystem level approach. So I think we're going to get there pretty soon. Also, these APIs to exchange the credentials aren't standardized yet, but that's being worked on right now. And back to education, like we just have a lot of education to do here. Justin, you want to talk about the timeline?
Yeah, so earlier this summer, the OB 3.0 proposal was submitted to IMS Global. From that was lots of conversation. In September, the official 3.0 charter was written. There was also a complementary CLR 2.0 charter, as the CLR group is planning on doing similar VC related work. In just recently, there was the technical advisory board vote, which was basically to whether or not we would approve the charter and commence work with a new working group. The charter has now been approved, and I think next Thursday will be officially the first work group meeting. I think it's next Thursday for the new 3.0 group transitioning from the 2.1 group. So at this point, we're kind of in mystery land in terms of when we think a draft specification would be complete. We had some very ambitious timelines earlier that related to kind of end of this month, I think even was originally when we were hoping we'd do it, but I can't see that happening now, given where we're at with the charter approval. But on February 28th is the IMS Digital Credential Summit, their first kind of in-person meeting since pre-pandemic. Several of us have committed, not necessarily for this conference, but I think that's sort of where we're headed at is developing proofs of concept, which hopefully we could then demonstrate and work on together at the conference, both with the working groups and potentially with some sessions with audience members. Yeah,
totally. Badger is working on some pilots with this organization called the Digital Credential Consortium out of MIT. They've created a learner wallet, it's open source wallet. And so we're going to be piloting with the university as part of that organization to issue open badges as verifiable credentials to that wallet. And that's something to figure out how we're doing it. We're going to try and get this done. How to get involved. So obviously IMS Global, there's a working group there, but also know that if you're not a member of IMS Global, there is a repository that is open for open badges on GitHub, which I can put the link to. There are discussions that happen in there that everybody can read. This is sort of a holdover from when Mozilla handed open badges over to IMS. So you can see what's going on there. Also, we have the VC Edu group, which is a VC Edu task force at the W3C. And I'm currently the chair of that. We're going to have some co-chairs soon, I hope. And what we're doing there is working on this alignment. Right? We're working out in the open with the W3C to help any education standards align with verifiable credentials. And right now we are running use cases and gathering as many as we can so that the work that we do can inform what happens at the Open Badges standard. And then of course, you can't really be at this conference and not mention the open recognition, like Aura, which is a great group, and we should always stay in touch with as this work goes on. I would love to be involved more with the community to hear more about what is needed, right, from the spec and what we can, if not into this version, then the next one. Then other than that, I think open things up for thoughts and questions. And while we do that, I'm going to just find the link to the proposal so you can all have a look at it. All right, I'm going to take a look in the chat here. Where should I start?
Well, I think I'll touch on that last question I just see, which is we're really talking about the decoupling of identity. So, you know, on your comparison chart, like we were talking about, you know, the issuer in OB2 versus 3. So we have this ability to almost import identity into platforms when they're DIDs because they are decoupled from the platform. Yes, the hope is that those identities will be managed externally. If you can imagine, as one of the roles that I'm pretty sure that wallets will play is actually the generation of identities for you to use and then provide to platforms for issuing. And similarly, the issuing bodies like the schools will be generating their DIDs in some mechanism, and then through a workflow, they could bring it into the badge platform. And that would naturally require some sort of verification process where you have to prove that you control the DID to then be able to issue as the DID from that native platform. And of course, you have to be able to control it to sign it correctly. So all of that should work out correctly. But we will probably in early stages, especially as we're proving the concept, have more looser DIDs where perhaps it is originating from the platform. They're producing, like say, a generative key or something like that. And that'll just get people over the hurdle of kind of getting a feel for how the ecosystem would work.
Thank you, Justin. That's great. I'm just reading through the chat here. Or the fact that V3 will be a breaking change with V2. Oh yeah, you know, that comes up a lot, Bert. And honestly, think about it in a different way. Think about it as just a parallel version, that 2.0 badges can coexist with 3.0 badges. And that the verifier software of the open badge, not the validator, not the verifiable aspect of the verifiable credential, but of the open badge itself, will be backwards compatible always, like it has been. So, so yeah, I don't love that it's totally a breaking change. I just don't like to think about it in that way because they can coexist. And also, I think that the improvements that come with 3.0 are worth this. And that at some point, I do hope we shift to this because it does give more agency to the learners, right, to be able to control their data. So I think the benefits outweigh that.
Robert, on your question about accessibility for this, the UX of this is going to be critical. I don't think the UX of OB2 is great. I think there are so many trappings with the kind of email-based workflow that some things they have low overhead, but then the usability or the power of the badge is compromised by it. A lot of the tools that we're starting to use for managing wallets and such, they're making use of identity behind the background or generating things, whether it's like biometric based stuff where, you know, your face or your fingerprint. If you think about like your Apple Wallet or, you know, concert tickets, sporting events and stuff where they're using digital verifiable type credentials, it's already kind of happening. So while I think at an implementer level, understanding what DIDs are and all that is important, from a UX perspective, I think the developers of technology will create workflows where that's all invisible to the user, and all they really know is they're going to set up something that they have coupled to their biometric security, and they can then authorize it into a third-party service. One example of this would be Microsoft is piloting some example technology for VCs specifically, and they've tied VCs into their authenticator app. So the same thing you use for two-factor authentication. They have a method for storing VCs in there. And so it's just tying to the same kind of stuff you're doing already for digital authentication. You just don't know that it's DIDs in VCs.
Mm-hmm. I'm on a panel next week, and we had a preparation call this week, and the panel topic is interoperability. And we went from interoperability to equity and access very, very quickly. And this because people keep talking about printing their credentials, because that is what people want. They want to have printed versions because they may not have access to smartphones. So I suspect, because in this panel, by the way, were 2 wallet providers who are aware of this too. And already there is a project with the US government that is doing age verification, and it includes paper as part of it. So I think that people are really thinking about this in other ways. I think that Justin is right, that there are many people who will be able to adjust this pretty quickly. And then I think that there will be other ways to use this technology. I'm curious to see what will happen with cell phones, like regular cell phones, because we've seen a lot happening with SMS and banking. And so what happens with SMS and VCs? I mean, that could be really great. So, yeah, exactly. PDFs. Seriously, it's funny because we talked about badges replacing PDFs for so long, and people really would like their PDFs. So there's ways to do that, I think. In the chat. Okay. Thanks, Robert. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question, and I was trying to type it out in chat, but it might just be easier for me to turn the mic on.
Sure.
So do you see, is OB3, do you see that as a move? It seems towards more machine readability, especially maybe at the assertion level, right? So I'm thinking about like UI and on the topic of UI and UX, are we trying to get to a more of a point where the person opens up the wallet on their phone and they're seeing, like a profile of their skills, and they're kind of interacting with claims about themselves at sort of a higher level than maybe individual assertions? Is that, and I know this is less a question about the actual standard itself and more of like, what are the implications of it? But I'm just curious if you see that as a kind of a move to where we're trying to go with this.
I think it's kind of like what Justin was saying about how the wallets are working on a phone already. How there is a visual aspect to it. You know what that credential is. You will accept it. You will put it in your wallet. It won't just be put there for you. But I think there is definitely more machine readable aspect to this. And how it will work really is that there would be, like, say for example, you need an open badge to see I don't know, you're going to use it to log into a platform. You would initiate that process with the platform, but the platform would ask you for a specific credential, and then you would provide that. And a lot of that interaction would be happening behind the scene. So it will be more use of the metadata than we're using now. Like now we're really sort of mostly sharing online, and this is definitely a shift to using more of the data by machines. Justin, would you say that's true?
Yeah, I think what happens is as it becomes more machine readable, the challenging, so if you think of the verifier challenging you for something to prove, can become more automated. A lot of the VC demos and stuff you'll see are usually things like your student ID card. And it's like, here, prove that you're a student at the school so you can get a 20% discount on this thing in the store. And that works, but as we become more sophisticated, we could have verifiers who are like not trying to human interpret the thing, but say instead, give me an open badge that proves that you have a degree in computer science, or give me an open badge that proves you have this skill alignment to this industry skill that we already care about. and they don't have to go reading through it to do it. You just like the challenge comes up, and depending on the wallet behavior, it is technically possible to kind of almost pre-select the open badge that would work with this too. Or at least I think it should be.
Exactly. All right, well, if there are no other questions, I think that's what we have for today. I'm going to put my email address in the chat if anyone would like to reach out and ask me questions. Put there in the chat for you right now. And also, I'm on Twitter here if you want to refine me. I'm happy to geek out about this anytime, because the more I talk about it, the more I learn about it. I have questions all the time, and I'm like in the thick of it right now. Thank you, Franz, and thank you, Justin, for doing this presentation with us today. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone, for being so attentive.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie and Justin. That was great. Super informative, and the sort of thing I'm going to have to go back and watch the video again.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, well, so I think we can go ahead and roll right into our next presentation, which is from Nate Otto, who's going to be talking about the Open Skills Network. Hello, Nate.
Justin, it's glad to be with you. Thanks for the invitation to present at another ePIC.
Thank you for joining. So let's see here, Nate. Do you want to share your screen or?
Yeah, let's do it. So.
Okay. Terrific.
I had my mute controls there locked for a second. But yeah, so I have a handful of slides and I'm looking forward to this discussion with you. I'll be sharing a few visual aids from the slides periodically throughout our little half hour here. And I do have a very hard stop right at the end of it. So let's try to make sure we can have a chance to get some questions in from the Zoom chat before we get it.
Perfect. Well, Nate, I thought we could get started by just, if you wouldn't mind, providing a bit of an overview of the Open Skills Network and just kind of let folks know sort of the gist of it, what it is.
Great. Yeah, the Open Skills Network is a really exciting network of employers, education providers, and technology companies that came together last year in 2020 with a shared mission, which we originally defined as making skills-based education and hiring a standard practice for the majority of organizations. Focus started in the US, and it has since grown to be more broadly international. And we at the OSN have supported a first round of pilots for the implementation of some of the ideas that we're going to talk about today in the Northern Hemisphere spring a few months ago. And a second round of pilots is just about to kick off. We just had the close of our proposals on the 1st of the month, and the new pilots for skills collaboratives are about to be announced next week around the 8th. So this is the idea. The Open Skills Network is a coalition of these organizations that fill really important roles within the skills economy, and we are gathered together for the purpose of making that economy work better for all. You can see that splash of many logos. It is a coalition. We gather in various different meetings that are organized around work groups for specific topics. And there's a lot of interest in this space. It's been mind-boggling growth over the last year. We started with an initial 4 organizations with the kernel of the idea, had a sort of a launch event in around, I think it was April 2020, and then sort of formally formed the network towards the end of August or so in 2020. And by May of 2021, this year, we had over 1,000 organizations that had joined. So the appetite for doing something better around the recognition of skills and using that to connect people's learning experience, lifelong, formal and outside of formal education, to their employment journey is resonating with a huge number of organizations that have joined up.
Okay. And so, Nate, the next question is just the OSN. What needs does it fulfill, or kind of what question does it answer? What's its reason for being?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I sort of set out like, what is this landscape that we work in, all these organizations across different roles? But this next question is sort of like, what is the need that it fulfills? And then maybe it connects to, and how does it do that? Is really more about the what of the work and how we work together. And so, but I said that it's a coalition of education providers, employers, and technology companies. The technology companies are there to provide solutions to various different organizations that use skills in their work every day. And we increasingly need to understand the skills of folks on our team and of the students that we teach and the applicants who are applying for jobs at our organizations in a machine readable way. And so the Open Skills Network is not just a place to talk about what a skill is in general. It's a place to actually create the technical interoperability between educational institutions and employers through the software that's produced by the vendors that serve them and the open standards that are produced by various standards bodies. It's important to know that even as we get into that technical work, the OSN is not a standards body itself. It's not like the W3C or IMS Global or IEEE, in which it publishes specifications or standards that describe specific rules for how to implement certain use cases. But we do talk about use cases and standards a whole lot. I'm the co-facilitator of the technical working group at OSN, and the technical working group focuses really precisely on these use cases for technical interoperability of information about skills. And so in order to do that, we're not drafting a standard, but we do have a document that we publish, which I'll bring here up on my screen at rsd.openskillsnetwork.org, where I'll introduce this concept of the rich skill descriptor here in a second, but we do publish a document that has in it what we call recipes, where we describe how to publish a rich skill descriptor. And though we aren't promulgating standards, we are linking to them, and we're describing how to use them with a focus on enabling the members of the OSN to connect with one another around the use cases, such as skills that need to be published, skill definitions, credentials that recognize those skills, and then look at the available standards in the world and choose how to use a particular standard. So for example, the IMS Global Standard case with the linked data binding, case LD, is a possibility for a standard to use to publish skills. And then in addition to that technical work, the OSN has work groups that provide policy guidance to governmental organizations and those that interact with government in order to understand how skills-based hiring can be enhanced within the connection between education and workforce. And then also we provide messaging and leadership to the overall space for skills-based hiring, and just talking about skills and the importance of increasing the equity and inclusion of all the folks in the world who have skills, which is all of us, making sure that we have better, improving equal access to the job market.
All right, great. So Nate, I know we have the RSD slide here. I wonder if you could just describe for folks a little bit, kind of a bit about rich skills descriptors and kind of what they are and what the advantages.
Yeah, absolutely. So this idea of a rich skill descriptor, and this idea is a concept that we named at the OSN, but it exists in many different communities as well, communities that we're connected to. An RSD is a definition of a skill that has a canonical URI that identifies it. And from that URI, a piece of software or a human can get information about the skill, which we call contextualizing metadata. So each RSD in that metadata includes at least a skill statement and then some additional attributes that define the skill more precisely, such as its authoring organization. You can see in this CTDL ASN recipe for publishing a skill descriptor, you can see a bunch of different attributes that are included. There's the idea of a skill name and a skill statement that are associated with terms from the CTDL ASN vocabulary that's published by the Credential Engine organization. And the important part is that this metadata can establish relationships to other skills as well. And it provides enough information for a computer system or a human to be able to understand what the skill definition is, that what we're talking about. And there can be many different communities that have their own skills definitions. Each individual educational institution or employer might sometimes publish them, and they might sometimes use definitions by others. But what's really important to us at the OSN is to enable interoperability across these organizations for the purpose of making skills work for humans. So making it possible to understand whether a position description is a good fit for me as a learner, or what I would need to learn next in order to become qualified for a career in a particular field. And it's also important for use cases such as being able to present my experience to an employer when it's time to actually apply for a job, or within my team when it's time to talk about my performance and go for a promotion. So, but the core idea here, rich skill descriptor is a skill definition. It has a URL, and at that URL, you can go get metadata and information about what the skill is. Then we talk about layering all these interoperability use cases on top of that, where skills do things for you once they have this machine readability and that unique ability to identify them within other places. So I'll get into a couple examples. And this diagram here on the right is what Western Governors University is one of the founding members of the OSN, what they call their diamond of interoperability, where there are a bunch of different use cases that reference skills. And these are all data structures that could be published, and we could build and identify open standards around them that reference skills using the same URLs. And when they do so, you unlock really powerful human interactions and organization to human interactions. So those use cases briefly, the ability to actually publish a skill is essentially the core nugget of what we have enabled. That's that first recipe I showed you on the rsd.openskillsnetwork.org site. Then, organization of those skills is another layer. I want to present one or more skills that are published by one or more organizations all together in one cohesive collection or framework, so that a viewer can understand how they are organized and what progressions might be between them. And so just gathering them in a bucket for a purpose, a very simple thing that has powerful consequences. Other use cases include referencing skills in credentials. We talked a little bit in the previous presentation about how Open Badges 3.0 will specifically make it easier and easier to recognize the achievement of skills where these skills are defined by a unique URL. You can say, yeah, my colleague Carrie has a particular skill. You can recognize her with a badge that recognizes that skill. And then those badges can be bundled up into longitudinal learner records. And you can describe learning pathways that include skill components, showing the progression of one skill to the next skill and how they bundle together and how they're organized. And then bringing it back into interoperability, you can do things such as describing job postings or position descriptions with skills that are required or used in the roles that are associated with that job, or skills that you would love to see applicants come to you with.
So one organization could publish its set of skills, its RSDs, and then the idea is kind of within that organization. Everyone is using the same definition of a particular skill. Is the idea also that an organization can, if it wants to, publish those skills definitions and make them kind of observable, visible from the outside as well?
Yeah, absolutely. The idea of this canonical URL is that there is a it's one URL that everyone uses when they talk about the skill definition. So let me show a screen share of a particular piece of software that was built. WGU was the founder of this software, and Concentric Sky, where I work, was the developer, technical vendor for WGU here. We call this the Open Skills Management Tool, or OSMT, OSMT. And this tool enables publishing of RSDs and the organization of those into collections. So I can take a look at the collections that I have here on the skills.badger.com instance of this open source tool, and I can find the Open Recognition Skills collection. And so this is a collection of skills that were defined by members of the Open Recognition work group at the OSN. I polled members and members of the public on Twitter for a number of non-traditional skills that were, or specialized skills that really mattered in your organization. Earlier in my career, and I'm sure you all have, all of you have had this realization as well, but I came to the realization that having skills yourself is great, but knowing who else on your team has specific skills is an invaluable ability in your work. And being able to define the skills that actually matter, that you need to know about your colleagues, is also really essential. So this project that I engaged in to create a little open recognition skills collection was just to demonstrate the idea that we all in our work roles and personal lives have this really rich understanding of granular skills that are not the ones that appear in competency frameworks published by governmental organizations or really, august ivory towers of learning. They are specialized to our communities, and knowing about them can be very powerful. And so ideas like the ability to schedule meetings in Microsoft Outlook for a team that uses Microsoft Outlook, that is a really important skill. For certain academic teams, we had the idea that interdisciplinary communication is an important skill. It'll allowing you to take your specialized jargon and understand how it needs to be adapted in order to communicate effectively with those who have different pools of expertise. So the OSMIT tool to publish definitions of skills. You can organize them for many different purposes, and many different communities can put them together.
And the OSMIT, that was something that we at OSN, round one of pilot projects to implement the OSMIT was actually just wrapped up not too terribly long ago, right? And there's another round of, they're not calling it pilots now. It's
they're
just
calling them skills collaboratives now. So the idea of the first round of pilots were sort of single organizations that wanted to publish their skills. And here's a instance of the OSMIT that organization can use. They tried that out, learned a lot that will feed back into the roadmap for OSMIT development. The second round of pilots is focused on what are called skills collaboratives, which are partnerships of organizations that are working in a particular domain or have interoperability needs to collaborate on the definition of their skills libraries and the integration of those skills into important workflows that connect to OSN use cases. So you'll stay tuned next week for the announcement of the participants in that second round of pilots, which will carry on over the next several months. It's also worth noting that the OSMIT, that tool that I just demoed, is available as open source software from Western Governors University. And so in order to gain access to it, we'll definitely join the OSN, but you can contact WGU for the information on how to get that code, how to install it into your own organization's infrastructure.
Yeah, I'm really excited for the point that, and something we've talked about in the Open Recognition work group, which, by the way, there is an Open Recognition work group as part of the Open Skills Network, which I'm actually co-chairing that with my co-chair, Julie Keene from Participate. And we've had a lot of good, really excellent discussions in there, and encourage folks to check that out. Yeah, excited at the prospect of the OSMIT being a tool that is available for folks to use, right? I mean, like you say, it's an open source tool right now. Organizations can take it and implement it. And I think that, as I understand it, the long-term goal is to, hopefully the OSMIT will be something that is available for more people to use too, like community.
Right, yeah, not every organization has the capability of spinning up an instance of a Docker container, doing all the work to integrate, DNS to get a domain name on it and an SSL certificate, and to integrate it with their login system. And so in the future, the roadmap for the OSMIT includes better support for multi-tenancy, which will allow organizations to publish an instance of the OSMIT that might serve hundreds of customers, opening up participation in this process of defining and organizing skills to a much broader range of organizations. It's also worth noting that the OSMIT tool is not the only possible technical solution that you can use to complete those publish RSD and publish collections use cases. There are other tools out there and other standards that are used. This one uses right now the CTD-LISN vocabulary, but there's another tool called OpenSol, which is an open source tool that implements the same concepts to publish skills and frameworks of those skills using the IMS case framework. In each case, each skill has a unique URL, and you can go to that URL and get information about the skill.
So I want to pause there and just ask, the group if there are any questions. Carrie says that Nate makes an excellent point about earlier discussion relating to about contextuality or recognition. Am I reading that right?
Sorry, I meant contextuality of recognition, just a late in the day typo. When Nate was talking about us creating skills that are understood in our communities, right? Or that communities have their own sets of skills that aren't necessarily global or official or what have you. Like, it's pretty important that we keep that in mind.
Yeah, one of the really important counterpoints to this idea of skills that are contextually important is the ability for multiple organizations to use the same skill definitions and to be using them as an actual shared language. And so just like that first round of OSMIT pilots focused on the ability for organizations to publish their own skills libraries, and then we move to a second round of pilots where we focus on using the same definitions across multiple libraries, there will be further technical developments that help enhance that reuse. Because reuse of the same language enables actual communication. If everyone's speaking their own language in terms of what skills exist, then it's much harder for us to actually do the interoperability use cases that we care about. An employer publishes a job posting that references skills A, B, and C, and in a student's resume contains skills X, Y, and Z. They don't connect. We really want to make it so that there's a world where the skill definitions are interoperable. And so one of those technical developments coming forward is that the OSMIT is looking to implement a federated search across many different instances of the OSMIT, and maybe even beyond, using the T3 Innovation Network's OCF collab protocols for cross skills library searching and things like that. This is a great example of how the OSN can lead technical work that implements specific use cases that enables transferability of skills, and then how that can actually turn back into software that enables us making better human connections around those skills.
In fact, Nate, I think Walmart right now is working on using Walmart is implementing OSMIT and is a big partner of OSN. Aren't they working with, I believe they're working with colleges to do some sort of like shared recognition of skills. And if that's not actually off the ground, then but
you've got some insider knowledge, perhaps. You heard it here.
Okay.
Folks. So I can't speak to specific details of maybe a specific program that's happening there, but yeah, it is really, the Walmart Foundation has been a really important supporter of the OSN work, not only in terms of funding, but in terms of actually trying to put these ideas into practice with credentialing and skill recognition, on the ground, not only for employees of their company, but also looking at integration into the hiring and career development practices that that organization involves in. The world's largest private employer. It's really an amazing thing to have partners of that scale in an effort like the OSN, because if we're going to be successful at making skills interoperability a real thing, we're going to need to get to that kind of scale.
So we do have a couple of questions in the comments here. To what extent is OSN global versus US focused?
Great. Bert, good question. So it really did start as a US-centric initiative. The 4 foundational partners and a lot of them, the many dozens of first organizations were all located in the US. A lot of the policy focus is really informed by the United States policy framework. But in recent months, we have had a growing number of OSN members from around the globe. And I think if you stay tuned for the pilot announcements next week, I have a little bit of inside info myself, but I think you'll be pleased to see a little bit of improving international diversity among the organizations that are actually getting, involved with the implementation work at the OSN. So, but definitely it's open to international folks. The meeting time, there are synchronous meetings. We operate in a structure of work groups where each work group meets usually about twice a month or every 2 weeks. And some of the meeting times are maybe a little bit more tuned to the US North American time zones than they are, for instance, to Asia Pacific. So results may vary, but as organizations join, and I'll put up a link to join, openskillsnetwork.org/join-now. As more organizations join, we can spin up more opportunities to connect across many different time zones.
And Don asks, how does this interoperate with solutions such as MC? MC's Skillaby?
Sure. So MC is indeed a partner in the OSN. If you squint very tightly at the logo cloud that I shared on a previous slide, you can see MZ participating there. But one of the things about RSDs that makes it possible for so many of these organizations to join our work is that the concept is so simple. A skill definition, which consists of a skill statement and other metadata, has a unique identifying URL on it. And then this concept can be used in many places. So as an example, within Open Badges, make an alignment to that URL. And the Open Badges alignment object allows you to put in a name and a description along with that URL and maybe a target code, although RSDs don't need extra target codes. And you're done. You've done the work of recognizing a skill. And so the MZ library, which they draw based on machine learning from many, many different job postings around North America is their main focus. Their skills are published as RSDs, meaning that they have canonical URLs and that you can obtain metadata and get more information about that skill from those URLs. So their products will more and more be compatible with the use cases that we're developing at OSN.
And Nate, I think you already spoke to this, but just folks who are wanting to get involved, you had the slide up there, and I think I'm going to drop into the chat the Open Skills Network membership page where folks can sign up for work groups as well.
I guess one thing I didn't forget to notice is that, of course, membership in the OSN is free. You do not have to pay a membership dues. We want to make sure that skills are open to all, and our foundational funders have funded the central organizing work of the OSN to help work group co-facilitators like myself get all their resources in line so that everyone can join in these conversations. And one sort of final thought I want to leave this community with, because it really connects to our work around open recognition, is a thought around equity. And we talk about equity a lot as a goal. A lot of the people who are in these conversations are white collar, upper middle class people, and we have had access to fairly privileged levels of education that not everyone has access to. I have an English degree. I feel like I am pretty confident at being able to express the skills that I have and to convert those skills back into meaningful employment. And I've been really, privileged to be able to work on teams where there were a lot of people who had similar educational backgrounds. But as we move into a world where we want to impact the type of scale that the OSN talks about, we need to make sure that equity is a focus and that we're not providing skills translation and conversion tools that apply to the people who already have the most skills or people who have the skills that are recognized from the traditional organizations that have always had a lot of outsized power in defining what skills matter in the world and creating those leather-bound pieces of paper that are the forms of recognition that carry the most weight. And so if we're going to be successful at the Open Skills Network in transforming the majority of hiring practice in the US and around the world to skills-based hiring, we're going to have to really make sure that the recognition of skills is democratized and that we can equally understand the experience of someone who has cobbled together 20-odd jobs over 20 years as someone who comes out of a 4-year education program that was competency-based with recognition of 1,000 different learning outcomes. And in order to accomplish that task, the ePIC community, the open recognition community, I think has a really unique and important part to play. Because like that with that open recognition skills collection, we know about skills that matter in our community, and we know about the peers that we work with who have those skills. And so it's our responsibility to make sure that we implement skills technology and solutions for interoperability that apply to people's skills across all different walks of life. It's not just something that the Walmart Foundation is going to do or that the ivory tower educational institutions are going to do. It is a project that we all have to be involved in.
Yes, thanks for that, Nate. That was awesome. And that's the our open recognition work group, again, which is part of the OSN, is very focused on doing what we can to bring in those different voices and be that inclusive voice, the squeaky wheel within the OSN. So Nate, thank you so much. I think unless there are any other questions, I'll pause.
I have a hard stop, so unfortunately I can't take any more, but do feel free to reach out to me at Autonomy on Twitter. I look forward to talking.
Yes. All right. Nate, thank you so much. All right. And then I think we are ready to move on to our, let's see here, our next presentation from Robin Sullivan. Hello, Robin.
Hi, Robin.
Hi, everybody. How's everyone?
Good. How's your conference been going?
It's been going. It's keeping me hopping, and you timed this really well inside of a break, but hopefully I don't lose my voice and this hotel Wi-Fi holds up. I do have my colleague here with me, Nicole Simon, who can kind of take over in a pinch just in case, but we'll hope for the best. I think everything should be good.
Good. So you're able to share?
Yes, I am.
Good. Excellent. So Robin's here to speak to us today about the Mtech MOOC, the Exploring Emerging Technologies, which I guess has a 10-year history. And she'll tell us about that and talk about future plans and how it relates to lifelong professional development. Take it away.
Sounds good. Give me just 1 second. I want to be able to try to see you all at the same time as seeing my slides, if that's possible.
So, looks great here.
Okay, you see okay? Looks good? All right. So, hello, everybody, and thank you very much for providing an opportunity to be able to talk about the State University of New York, our Exploring Emerging Technologies for Lifelong Learning and Success. And the title of our session here is Engaging Students, Instructors, and Others Worldwide Through Mtech MOOC. And we will address talking about integrating Coursera and digital badges. So that's the really long title of our project, Exploring Emerging Technologies for Lifelong Learning and Success. We will shorten it a few times and call it either Mtech or Mtech MOOC. The URL is on the screen, and it's a nice short one. suny.edu/mtech. My name is Robin Sullivan. If you need to look me up, my legal name is Roberta, but everybody calls me Robin, so please do. I am a teaching and learning strategist with education services in the University of Buffalo Libraries. My email is on the screen and you're all more than welcome to reach out. My colleague Cherie had some family problems and was not able to join us, but I do have a colleague on the call, Nicole Simon. And Nicole, are you able to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everybody. I'm Nicole Simon from Nassau Community College, part of the SUNY network, and I'm also on the Mtech project.
Great, thank you. And the project has been a collaborative effort with faculty, staff, and students from across the SUNY system. That is one of the largest public research institutions in the US, and very lucky to have a lot of really great collaborators. So the project kind of hinges on this big idea. It's a learning opportunity that helps people understand, there's so many internet tools, tutorials, and resources. They change and grow every single day. And something that might be available now could go away very easily, tomorrow. So they all have different purpose. They all have different levels of quality. And, how is somebody supposed to know which one to choose? So that's the reason why somebody might want to participate in Mtech. So the project is discovery learning to be able to explore and reflect on innovative and creative uses of emerging technologies. And it is a learning opportunity that is available. It's especially well suited for college level students and instructors. And it is also, these digital media, digital literacy skills are necessary for pretty much everyone in today's society, no matter where in the world you are, pretty much any level or profession. And so anybody that has an interest to stay current is encouraged to participate. It will help with career marketability, help you become informed digital citizens, and improve and allow you to enlarge your social network and your social networking abilities. It's available for both beginner and advanced users and everything in between. The project has two different components. One is a Coursera-based MOOC, massive open online course. And the MOOC provides the supportive learning community. So within the MOOC, there are a number of modules. You see the interface on the screen. It looks like any learning management system with content on the side, quizzes, and the discussion forums we use to share the learning and share the artifacts that are created as somebody learns. The MOOC hinges on the idea of lifelong learning. So we all in today's society need to be able to continue to learn so that when these technologies change, we're able to easily change along with it. And also the importance of the 4 C's of 21st century skills: communication, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking. Those kind of guide the modules in the course. And the other component is Mtech Wiki. So the wiki is a growing database. The Mtech portion of the project is been around for about 3 years, but Don mentioned that we have a 10-year history. Mtech was kind of built on our lessons learned from our previous projects, but the wiki database is one of those lessons learned. So we had a static website that had links to all those different freely available emerging technologies. And those links would break often. They would not stay current. Were not able to keep up. And so we now have a crowdsourced wiki. It started out with about 150 resources, and now we have close to 550 tools, tutorials, and other articles, how-tos, and all kinds of information. The Wiki is used in collaboration with the MOOC. So you go in through the MOOC, you go through the content. It's not heavy on the content. It's more guiding users towards exploring on their own and then reflecting and sharing back. But when you get to the assignment within each module, you are asked to go to the wiki, filter it, and find one of the resources that meets your particular objectives. I'll talk a little bit further about that in another slide. And you go to the wiki, you create a resource, and then you build that into an artifact that you position into an ePortfolio. In that ePortfolio, you then add just a few paragraph reflection about what it is that you learned, what it is that you might have found is useful for your needs or maybe not useful, and something else might be suitable. It's a standalone web page. You can go to that URL I mentioned. It's available to anybody without logging in to be able to search through and filter and find anything that you're looking for. This is a blow up of the screen. And so if you are in the MOOC, you see the modules across the midsection. The first one is lifelong learning. That's kind of the most heavy module out of all of them. The topics that we cover are your digital footprint, open educational resources, information literacy, privacy, security, accessibility. So all the big ideas that kind of hold up the supporting 4 C's. And then the next few modules are based on the 4 C's. We have communication and collaboration as module 2. Creativity is the 3rd module, critical thinking. And then the 5th module, the final module, is a summarize, kind of pull everything together and share your portfolio that you've been building. So the wiki allows you to, if you're coming from the 2nd module, it takes those 500 resources, automatically trims them down into the resources that are most suited for communication and collaboration. You then pick the objectives that are what you are hoping to achieve. And then the side menu, the categories, that just shows you that it's broken down into all these different technology tools. Accessibility, blogs, wikis, I'm not going to read them all. Digital literacy, there's a number of great resources in there. Presentations like Google Slides, what I'm using here. And also simulations, video is probably our most used category. We are currently working to improve the taxonomy. We are adding in the ability to also search and also add keywords and tags. And also some audience special interest filters will be added. We are very tightly involved with the SUNY COIL system. COIL stands for Center for Online International Learning. And excuse me, virtual exchange is a topic that they use technologies often, like we are right now, to communicate from Buffalo, New York. Well, actually, I'm in Syracuse, New York, to New York City, where Nicole is near, to wherever you are in the world, not next door. So we're using these tools to internationally collaborate. Another tag that we want to add. Right now, the project is mostly geared towards college level learners on up. Instructors is a big target audience, but we recently received a National Education Association grant that is allowing us to expand to reach more specifically to K-12 teachers. Another thing that we hope to improve with our taxonomy, and probably the biggest challenge that I think we've discovered, promoting these freely available tools to learners and to instructors in colleges across the world. One of the big concerns has been, well, who has vetted the privacy and security of these tools that we're telling people to create an account? Who has vetted the accessibility? And also in relation to the virtual exchange, are these tools available across the different countries? There are many countries that might have restrictions where something is not accessible. Nicole, please, and Don, please help me keep an eye on the chat if anything comes up that I should address. And I'm certain I would, if questions come up as I'm going through, I'm happy to address them as we go. But I will also leave time for questions. So the wiki, it's a wiki. That means that tools, resources, and tutorials can be added by pretty much anybody. All you need to do is go to the contribute menu and create an account for the wiki. That's a separate account from Coursera's login. And then you can add anything that you feel is useful to the project. They are vetted before they go live. The team, Nicole, myself, and others will make sure that the language is appropriate for what we're trying to convey and that the addition is kind of within the scope of what we're trying to share. To summarize the learning process in the MOOC, you go through and you read, view, and participate with the course materials. It's not a content-heavy MOOC like many you would find in Coursera. The videos are 2 to 3 minutes, and they have been created again by a faculty, staff, and students from across SUNY that explain the value of using technologies for the different 21st century skills. You would then explore the wiki, select a tool or a resource, and complete a discovery exercise. That exercise has the learner create an artifact. So if you're deciding that YouTube is the artifact or the resource, the tool that you want to learn about, we would ask you to create a short video, and then you would share that video on a page in the ePortfolio that you build throughout the course. Eportfolios is another category you can choose. And right now, I think we have about 40 different freely available tools. Keep in mind, when I say free tools, they're mostly freemium. So they're free, but there's always a pro level. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with that concept. And probably the topic that everyone on the call here is most interested to learn more about. As you go through this learning opportunity, you have the ability to earn digital badges and also a Coursera certificate to show that you have gone through the course, and the badges will link directly to the portfolio that you've created and to the reflections that you've written. So I think in the very early years, my colleague from SUNY Fredonia brought up the idea of using digital badges. And, I was extremely skeptical. And I said, why do we need these little gold stickers? At first, back then, we were dealing with college faculty. And I said, they don't need these gold stars. Those are used in the primary grades. And she convinced me otherwise. And we went forward and we used the Credly system. We still do. And we have been issuing badges upon completion and in different other instances. I'll share some information about that a little bit down the road. Why should somebody bother with this learning opportunity? What do they get out of it? Well, one thing they'll get is an ePortfolio. And the ePortfolio has been changed in the past year or two. It was a required part of the course. We have changed it. There were a few people who wanted to be more private in their learning, and so they have opted to create a private learning journal. So there's now a separate badge for an ePortfolio. We issue MOOC completer badge, and that's one of the recent changes. The completer badge is earned by going through all of the modules, and there are more objective multiple choice quizzes that you would go through in each module. And those quizzes kind of give you a case study if you were trying to figure out how to get from Buffalo to Paris. How might you want to do that? Well, that's probably not good. Example, Buffalo to Syracuse, you might want to get a navigation map and find out, what is the best driving route. So the The digital badges are a big part of the project, and when somebody earns a digital badge, they would then be able to share it through LinkedIn, or they would share it on their portfolio, and then they can have the people that view their badge, it will link directly to their ePortfolio if they've created one. If they chose not to create an ePortfolio, they do not earn that digital badge. If they do create the portfolio, there is a rubric that is used within Coursera in a peer review process. So I would have to review two peers' portfolio, and the learners would then also have to review two others. So as me, I would review theirs, and then they would find two portfolios to review as well. The Coursera certificates, this is all semi-new, and so there's not a lot of heavy research. What are the value of digital badges? There is much research out there, but with Coursera certificates, there's also, what is the value? Are employers recognizing these credentials as something of value when they are looking to hire? So these are probably the benefits of the course. We hope the biggest benefit is that of being a lifelong learner. So the MOOC and the Wiki, they both teach very necessary skills. These big skills are lifelong learning, a growth mindset. So instead of saying, well, I'm not good at math, saying, well, I don't know math yet, but if I try hard enough, I can learn whatever it is that I need to learn. We promote lifelong learning throughout the course. Creating a digital footprint and creating a professional identity is highly valued. And as people are building their portfolios, people like myself and others go through and provide supportive comments. We do invite all the people who complete the MOOC to become a fellow. And then if they provide supporting comments of other learners after they've completed it, we would then issue them a Mtech Fellow badge that they can also put on their CV and LinkedIn. And also digital security and privacy is something that we talk about a lot. We are currently working to identify the privacy and security value, and also how much a tool might be accessible to a broad audience. That's probably one of the biggest complaints against the free tools right now, is that they are not very much vetted. We have a student intern who has been helping us to identify if a tool has a VPAT, a voluntary product accessibility template, and then we will link that directly to the wiki records. In addition, we are trying to identify if there is a FERPA a compliance. FERPA is a US privacy standards, and also the GDPR that is more used in Europe, but applicable across the world. And there's also another compliance standard for privacy and security called EDLAW 2D. And that is New York state specific for K-12. And in a lot of instances, a school may not be able to, or would not be able to, adopt a certain tool if it is not EDLAW compliant. So we are trying to identify those tags. And in addition to what you saw before, what category is it in, what is the objective, we will also have these security and accessibility tags connected to each of the different records. So the project went into a revision, and that was a little less than a year ago. Some of the different things that we changed was we made the ePortfolios optional. The learning journals was something that we now encourage. And then we also made it so that the course can be completed pretty much on a more objective level And with the multiple choice quizzes, that objective nature allows Coursera to automatically determine if the quiz has been passed or not. And Coursera, within the past year or so, Coursera was allowing IBM and Google to issue digital badges with their Coursera-based MOOCs. It was only soon, I think towards the end of last year, where they then extended that to most any other MOOC. And I think we kind of got a little wind of it, and there's not a lot of the Coursera-based MOOC yet that I am aware of that issue digital badges. But we were having kind of a little bit of a struggle. This was kind of right as the pandemic hit, and the MOOC is used by quite a few countries from all over the world. And some people were figuring out that we can't really monitor the peer review process. So people were trying to circumvent that system. And so that was kind of the impetus of why we changed from issuing the digital badges based on the completion of the portfolio and changed to multiple choice, and then allowing people to submit for an additional badge for that ePortfolio. So we used to also give a badge we started giving out badges for each of those different categories. So if you went through the photo section, you were able to earn a badge. If you created an artifact, if you went through presentations and you created an artifact and a reflection, you issued a badge. That was a little too much. It was a manual process to start out with. We had a Google form where people said, here's the link to my portfolio, check it out. We checked it out, we issued the badge. So that was a little too much. So we kind of backed down a little bit and said, okay, let's start issuing a badge for each of the different modules. I'll show you some statistics in a slide or two, but we've had 30,000 people who have enrolled in the MOOC in 3 years. And even issuing the badges manually for each of the different modules, it just was not feasible. So this is why we issued version 2, where now you can complete the MOOC by completing the multiple choice quizzes. And those are case studies, and they steer you towards, looking up resources within the MOOC. So you're getting the exposure. This is what you're trying to do. Here's a tool. Here's 4 different tools. Which one is most appropriate? So you might have to go look up, what does Google Culture, what does that help me do? Or what does TED Talks, what is that as compared to some video editing application? So I'd say that's probably one of the biggest changes that we did recently since the last time that I shared the project through this group. I do want to mention that Mtech is freely available to anybody in this world. Anybody, at most Coursera-based MOOCs, you can go through and you can go through and access the content. But then when it comes to the assessments, the quizzes, if you put your answers in, I think, this is question number 1 is answer A, question 2 is C. You can put your answers in, but unless you pay for the fee, most Coursera MOOCs will not tell you whether or not you pass or whether or not those answers are right. Mtech is free. You can go through the entire thing. We will give you whether or not you passed and whether those, you can take, it's mastery based, so you could take the quizzes as many times as you need to be able to pass. But you would need to pay, there is a small $29 fee if you wanted to earn the certificate and the digital badges. Since this project was established through SUNY grant funding, anybody that is affiliated with the State University of New York system is eligible to register. And when they do, they will also be able to earn a free certificate and digital badges. In addition, after the pandemic, past Governor Cuomo had also made a partnership between Coursera and New York State. And anybody that's in New York that can go to the Department of Labor website, you fill out a Google form, and you state if you are underemployed or unemployed. Almost everyone is underemployed. So I would like to be at the next level up. So pretty much everybody in New York is eligible to earn those free badges and certificates by going through the Department of Labor. There's a few other states that have made that same kind of agreement with Coursera, and I'm not sure, internationally how this is happening, but I know Tennessee and maybe it's Minnesota is the other state that I'm aware of. There's also many different offers that Coursera provides. They have partnerships with companies, John Deere, L'Oreal. They have their staff go through training in Coursera. So there's a lot of different ways that people can take advantage of Coursera MOOCs, including Mtech. And so we feel that digital literacy, media literacy, these 21st century skills, they are crucial for people who are either displaced workers and also underserved populations who may have some access that, their access to technologies is not as easy as it might be for those who are more privileged. So I see that you guys are talking in the chat, so I am very curious if I should stop and possibly answer some questions at this point, and then I can go through and give you some more stats about the project. Is there any questions I can talk about?
I had a question in there. I think Nicole has dealt with it. Basically, it's that age-old question of how do you balance authenticity of assessment versus scalability and affordability. And I think you've given the answer there. I guess I could pass on so if somebody does not pay because they're part of New York, say the SUNY system or whatever, you have ongoing funding to handle those kinds of assessments?
No.
Okay.
We are continually on the lookout for grant funding. Prior, to maybe about less than a year ago, a lot of the time that was spent on the MOOC was a portion of my position at the University at Buffalo. Unfortunately, that is no longer the case. So now we are hitting the pavement even harder, trying to find grant funding to be able to support and sustain this project. We are also, I'm going to skip ahead a slide or two and then I'll come back. We are also continually on we are seeking partners. So we all feel that there's a lot of value in this project. There's a lot of benefit. I will go back and show you some of the statistics. But we need some partnerships. We've had a couple of donors, individual donors who have come forward. We have been considering, can we open up crowdsourcing? What are the legalities of that? We've been talking with SUNY about, the project was built as an open educational resource. So that means anybody can pick up the project, duplicate it, and use it as they see fit. So we are trying to figure out, can we, do that same thing? Can we get corporate sponsorship? Can we get, organizations to also see the value in this? We just submitted, in the US, there is the emergency broadband benefit that came about. The idea of technology is not very equitable for those who are in rural areas, for those who have low income, for seniors, for many different groups. And so part of the stimulus funding that has been made available as a result of this is now being provided through grants. And so Nicole, myself, and a few others have recently pulled together, we feel it's a very, very possible proposal to seek additional funding to keep us going into the future. And we will be targeting the SUNY Hispanic serving institutions in the local communities. So instead of, we really had most of our marketing efforts on the higher ed. We now want to try to expand. The conference that I am at right now is a conference of librarians across New York State. So we haven't really told libraries that this is available. This is programming that they can offer to the patrons that come into the libraries who are trying to better their technology skills. So if you click on the link that is on the slides, Don, I will make sure to share the slides with you. You'll see that we have a call for partnerships. If anybody has any inclination or any connections that they can pass on to us on how we can gain additional partners for this project, we would love to hear from you. Please also, on that call for partnerships, we link you to a page that has information to allow you to share information about Mtech. We have flyers, we have social media posts, we have digital videos from a minute in length to an hour or longer. We also hope people can assist us to continually contribute and moderate the tools and resources, and even just the rating of these tools. If you go in and you find that PictoChart is the tool that you found to be useful, hit the little up button so that through crowdsourcing, others will know the value of one tool as compared to another. We would also welcome anybody who would like to help us with some scholarly research. Since this project has been established, I think we had 40 separate peer-reviewed proposals or chapters or journal articles that faculty have used to seek tenure or full professorship. Congratulations, Nicole, to her recent professorship advancement. And grant writers. If anybody is, possible, has an idea that they would like to assist us with grant writing, we would love to have that assistance. So any other questions before I go back and talk a little bit about some of the statistics?
Justin, you were asking a question earlier.
Yeah, and it looks like it's been answered in the chat, but
Nicole, can you kind of, I guess, Justin, can you reiterate the question for those that might be listening to the recording? And then Nicole, I'm going to let you kind of reply also for the benefit of anybody that listens afterwards.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Just curious what insights you have into who's using the wiki and who is contributing to the wiki.
The wiki is open, so anybody can freely use it, and we encourage people to use it so that they can build up their digital literacy skills and share out that knowledge base. But we do track who actually adds to the wiki once they create an account, because we want to be mindful that we're ensuring privacy and security, and we're FERPA and GDPR compliant. But we do monitor who is adding to the wiki.
Also, Nicole, do you want to address our worldwide coverage and a number of learners in some of the locations?
Sure, we've had over 30,000 learners worldwide, and you can see just on the size of the bubbles where we've had the largest uptick of users. We found that during the beginning of the pandemic, a lot more users signed into the MOOC, which was wonderful, building up those digital literacy skills. We certainly encourage it. We've also had a lot of partnerships through, like Robin said earlier, something called COIL, which is Collaborative Online International Learning, which is a SUNY initiative. For the rest of the world, they typically call it virtual exchange. by having this, we've encouraged more of our partners to come in with their students and to use either enroll in the MOOC or use the wiki either in each of the different pillars, the core sections separately, or combine in their course to, again, build those worldwide digital literacy skills.
Great, thank you, Nicole. And Don, do you also want to ask your question verbally and then we can address that?
Sure. So basically, yeah, the question being MOOCs, as you said, all the content is freely available, but if they do want to be assessed, I guess, and get the certificate and the full collection of badges, they would pay $29 US. And my question was whether a lot of international learners were doing that. And I guess I'm mostly interested in places like Africa and Southeast Asia and places like that.
I think the lack of experience on being able to make heads or tails out of the analytics and the statistics that we get, not really clearly able to answer your question. I'm sure if somebody were able to dig into those, we have Google Analytics on the website going. But in Coursera, I do think, for example, Singapore was just one of the countries that has that really big bubble. And I believe that it caught on. So in Singapore, there is, I think it's a law that anybody over 18 has to provide volunteer work to be part of their civil service. Either they're firefighters or police force, EMTs, and a few other. And so we were seeing tons of Singapore firefighter trainers and police trainers coming through. And so, I kind of think that, once you get that little community together that kind of learns together, it catches fire. And I don't know if they were the people who actually paid the funds to participate through Coursera, or, which countries were. It's possible that that might be able to be determined. But Coursera gives you some data, but not enough data. And they don't give it to you in a user-friendly form. They also restrict they protect the privacy of the learners. So it's so difficult for us as the instructors of the course to communicate directly with a learner. They don't want to reveal the email and their name and the connections. But we do see, which countries are the ones that have the most use. But that's a good question. I should ask them which ones have the most payments. They did tell me that organizations have attributed a lot to the funds that this MOOC is bringing in, which is not a heck of a lot.
So they're paying for the individuals maybe that work for their organization or something. Is that it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Their business model has also changed, Coursera, a couple of times in the couple of years that we've been dealing with them. And there is something new called the Campus Consortia Agreement, which SUNY has made a partnership with. And I'm not on those high-level conversations, but SUNY has made an agreement with Coursera to be in their Campus Consortium Agreement, which means anybody in SUNY can take any Coursera course now. It used to be Mtech was special in that way. But SUNY has not really advertised it much. And I think there's many other systems, Minnesota and others that are also in this consortia, so that Minnesota can now take all of the Coursera courses. And don't quote me on if that's if that state is in there, but I know there's many states that are in there. So they've changed from kind of individual, and now they're looking more at the group agreement. Again, something like the agreement that New York State made. I don't know what kind of funds changed hands to allow all New Yorkers that are unemployed and underemployed to be able to participate. Little beyond what I'm aware of.
While I've got you on the line,
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit more about the human assessed badges? So they've done the automated quizzes, they've got their basic badges, and now they want to go further using some form of ePortfolio that somebody examines. Can you just talk about
Yes.
that and the criteria?
Sure. So in the MOOC, they are in the middle of the course, they are asked to share their portfolio through a peer review assignment. That's something that is built into the Coursera system. And that is an optional activity. And that is, you need to review one person. And once you do that, then one person will review yours. If that passes based on the rubric, then it goes on to the next level. And then at the end of the course, there's another peer review. That one is then expanded to 2 peer reviews back and forth. And once they do that, they then fill out a Google form, the person that has their successful peer reviews. And they say, here's a link to my portfolio. I'm John Doe, and here's my email address in this Google form. And we then look at it and say, okay, I see 4 artifacts. I see 4 reflections. I see that those reflections are at least 2 paragraphs long with at least 3 sentences in each paragraph. We don't go much deeper than that. So it's not extremely intense, but it is, you have to meet the minimum criteria. Once that happens, we then are able to batch process and upload the Google spreadsheet as a CSV file into the Credly system. And when we first started this, actually, 5 or 6 of the years, we were able to use the free version of Credly. Nowadays, there is no more free version of Credly. That's a little sad to me that we promote, please learn about freely available tools to enhance your life and your digital literacy. So Credly is one of those tools. That's actually an example of what we try to teach. It could be free one day, and then, once it's off the ground and running, it might not be free anymore. So I see that we are, seconds away from being up with our time. You are welcome. I will share the slides with you, Don, and everybody is welcome to go to the website, explore it. The link shows the impact of the MOOC, and I'm just going to quickly run through this. We've issued a little more than 3,000 badges in the 3 years, but keep in mind at the beginning we were doing it for every category. They're fewer and far between nowadays. The most shared platform is through LinkedIn. We have some videos and comments from participants. There's the map that I showed you. The breakdown, I find this real interesting. We really started our marketing with students and faculty, but it is pretty much a pretty even split between people that are employed inside academia, outside academia, not employed students. We even have some high school students that have discovered it and are using it. There's some additional statistics here. People feel that they are gaining lifelong learning skills, habits. It's enhancing their abilities to use emerging technologies and influencing their comfort level. If we can just do that, I'm real happy. They're recommending it to their colleagues, 89%. And people are going back even after the course ends to use the wiki. And this might be interesting to this group. The value, can't really fit this all on the screen real well. Let me try that. The value of receiving digital badges. Does it add value to your experience? The numbers are 10% say quite a bit, very much. Actually not available. 58% say it does influence them quite a bit, very much. 17% say it does a little bit, and 16% said no. The Coursera certificates, we have 67% who said yes. And so I'm going to stop share. And again, thank you all very much for your time and attention. I'm available to stay if anybody has additional questions that we can address. And thank you, Nicole, for sharing that email address. I am also going to put my address in the chat. Anybody is welcome to reach out directly.
Yeah, if you want to put the link to the presentation there too, that might be welcome. I
can do that.
Well, thanks very much, and your voice did last all the way through. I heard a couple of points that go, maybe she should have a drink of water.
Thank you, Nicole, for being here for me.
Always.
Yeah, she's a good support.
That's great. It's a great end to the Americas window of November 5th of ePIC 2021. So thank you very much for doing such a great job of doing that, sort of bringing up the end of what's been quite an interesting long day. All the best for the coming years. I think it deserves to continue. You can quote me on that.
Great.
And,
yeah, you're on recording still, right?
All right. Yes. And we'll look forward to seeing you maybe talk about future accomplishments at future epics. It was great to meet you in Bologna and be in touch since.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.